A lot of you know me as the rank 1 Dark Knight, but did you know I was also a rank 13 Black Mage and a rank 13 Pictomancer? All of that is to say, I love getting to play every job Final Fantasy XIV has to offer, and I'm here to show you how you can do the same. Now, learning a new job can be very daunting. If you go to the balance, you're going to find Google Docs with 10 or more pages, and to be honest, nobody's got time for that. So my solution to that is learning how to play these new jobs by recognizing patterns. So without further ado, let's get started with some misconceptions about learning a new job. One of the biggest things I often see when players go to learn a new job is they'll go straight to FF logs and pull up a rank 1 log and try to learn the job based off of what they see. While initially that may seem like an intuitive solution to learning a job, I think looking at logs without a foundation doesn't provide as much value as learning a job from scratch. That's not to say they're bad, but someone who doesn't understand how to play a certain job might not understand why these players are making the decisions that they are. But to expand on that, if I'm looking at logs for jobs I haven't played yet, the buttons that I'm seeing on my screen don't really mean anything to me, and looking at that log doesn't really tell me how to press them. Maybe I'm just stupid and need a little bit more attention to learning jobs, but it's always been a struggle for me when trying to learn how to play a job through logs. When I go to optimize the job, however, it makes total sense. It's pretty weird, I know, but it is what it is. Which is going to lead us to my first major tip when learning a new job, and that's understanding patterns. Now, understanding the patterns that translate from each job will cut down the time it takes to learn that job significantly. And to showcase this point better, let's go ahead and talk about the tanks. Now, the tank I'm most proficient in is Dark Knight, but I'm able to play all the tanks at a similar level, and that's because I understand the pattern that translates between them. If we take a look at their rotations, all of the tanks in the game have something that stems from their 1-2-3 combo. Warrior, Dark Knight, and Gunbreaker all have gauge that they're building through their 1-2-3 combo, but also, they all have 1-minute abilities that give them free usages of some of their strong spells. Throw in some more OGCD damage abilities to keep on cooldown, and now you know how to play 3 out of the 4 tanks. Paladin's only difference from the rest of the 3 tanks is its 1-2-3 combo doesn't generate gauge, but instead gives you access to another 1-2-3 combo and a Holy Spirit. Now, if you'll notice, I didn't actually talk about any of the specific weapon skills, and that's because that's context you would have gained from reading your tooltips. And now that we've established a pattern, we can actually identify which GCDs these actually are. Now, I know we were just talking about the tanks, but to be honest, a lot of the jobs in Final Fantasy XIV do share the same set of rules that the tanks do, at least when we're talking about the rotation. When we look at every class in the game and the rotations, you'll start to notice that they're designed to achieve one single goal, and that goal is to perform the opener, the odd minute and even burst, and then loop. Now, if we think about the opener, odd, and even minute burst as a template, you'll start to notice that jobs like Warrior and Astrologian are actually pretty similar. Now, at a first glance, that might seem like an extreme comparison. I mean, Astrologian has 2 buttons for damage, and Warrior has more than 2. But when we're trying to learn how rotations work, it doesn't matter what buttons are actually in the rotation. All that matters is that the buttons that we are pressing are ordered in such a way that we're able to do this loop every single time. Let's take Samurai for example. At an initial glance, Samurai may look like a difficult job since it has more than one 1-2-3 combo, and having charges of Meikyo doesn't really give us a good idea on how to use them. But remember, as long as you understand the pattern of looping, you will be able to learn how it works. One of the biggest questions that needs answering when learning a new job is, okay, I understand the opener from the balance, but where do we go from there? 9 times out of 10, the answer is just start a new combo and hit the buttons that light up. For a job like Samurai, that can be tricky because once I press Gyofu, 3 buttons light up at the same time and now I'm confused. Except, I don't actually need to be. Every job in Final Fantasy XIV has a gauge, and your gauge is something you should be using as a reference to guide you through your rotation. As we can see from this example, my gauge is completely empty, which means choosing any path is a viable option. Once we press the final GCD in that sequence, the gauge tells me that we must take the 2 other paths before we can achieve our spender. Pretty straightforward, right? But it gets a little more complicated when we want to factor in our damage over time and using Meikyo. Remember when we talked about the tanks earlier and said that they have 1-minute buttons that they just want to use on cooldown? We can actually treat jobs that have charges the same and use them to align our GCDs for good burst windows. So if we look at our Samurai example, as you can see, as soon as I gain another stack of Meikyo in the odd minute, I'm not using it immediately. Instead, I'm using it to align my GCDs to better fit my loop. Samir, don't you think if you want to teach us how to play every job, you should teach us Black Mage? I mean, it is the hardest job to play in the game. Listen here, you dirty little LARPer. We can't just ignore the fact that ever since Dawntrail, the changes that have been made to Black Mage have absolutely made the job easier and more accessible. There isn't a single job in Final Fantasy XIV that I would say is too difficult for someone to learn. And you know what? Just to make you mad, it is my belief that Black Mage is actually one of the easiest jobs in the game now, and anyone who wants to play it should. In all seriousness, while it's true I don't think Black Mage is as difficult as it once was, it is different holistically from the rest of the jobs in Final Fantasy. But even still, we can use all the techniques we talked about earlier to recognize patterns that even Black Mage has. After countless hours of spreadsheeting these jobs, it has become very apparent that if we start seeing these GCDs as sequences and phrases, we can better understand how each job flows. So to contextualize it into Black Mage, if we stop looking at Fire 4 as an individual GCD and start looking at what we're actually trying to work towards, we can start to notice that there are blocks of GCDs that just end up repeating itself. And this is something found in all jobs. But for Black Mage, you're usually always casting 6 Fire 4s, 1 Paradox, 1 Despair, and 1 Flare Star before switching to your Ice phase to only then start that whole sequence all over again. This is what many Black Mage players call lines. Now, lines aren't something that's exclusive to just Black Mage. A line can look like this on Monk, and can look like this on Summoner. I mean, you get the point. These patterns are there and they've always existed. And if you just take the time to recognize them, you can apply them to any job. With that all said, it's time to get to the really fun part, and that's optimization. For me, playing the job is a lot of fun, but I get a lot of enjoyment from optimizing these jobs and pushing the damage to its theoretical limit. And just like learning a new job, there are patterns that apply to optimization as well. And these patterns mostly have to do with our big spender buttons and our gauge. A lot of jobs in Final Fantasy XIV have really big buttons that do a lot of damage, as well as gauge that we're building throughout the course of a fight, and then dumping them during buff windows. The general rule for wanting to optimize around these constraints is that for gauge jobs, we never want to overcap, and for our cooldowns, well, use them on cooldown. These rules, along with maintaining as close to 100% GCD uptime as possible, will get you to that 95th percentile, and getting to that 99th or 100th, well, that's going to take a little bit more planning. To segue back to the point I made at the start of the video, looking at top logs isn't going to help you understand how to play the job, because it's more than likely that these players are actually deviating from these patterns in order to gain bits of damage. And this becomes a problem because if you don't understand why they're doing this and you're just copying the rotation, whenever you go to a new fight, there's a high chance that what they're doing may not be viable in that fight. Here's an example from the rank 1 log of Brute Abominator from the Cruiserweight tier. If we look at the Dark Knights in this log, we can see that we're not using all of our cooldowns in the opener. Instead, we're using them around the 1 minute in order to maximize the amount of damage we can gain from the ads. But as someone completely new to Dark Knight, you might look at this and say, oh, I shouldn't be using my cooldowns at the start of the fight, because that's what the rank 1 guy did. And you'd be right, but only when talking about Brute Abominator. The reason why this matters is because these players are able to make decisions like this because they have a deep understanding of how Dark Knight works. Not just that, but they also understand that what they might do from fight to fight is going to be different, and that difference is caused by fight design. So with all of that out of the way, how do we actually get to this level? This is going to sound super cliche when I say this, but you need to have a really good solid foundation, which means you need to understand how jobs work around fights in Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, could you get away with just copying the rank 1 log for every fight? I mean, absolutely, but what happens when that player stops playing? Or even worse, what happens if they continue to play but decide to private log and just dump all of their scores at the end of the patch? I guess the point that I'm trying to lead to is, you need to be extremely proactive and recognize the patterns that are translatable from job to job. And once you understand that, you'll be able to take that next step and start pushing for high parses. I know I didn't give you set instructions on how to get there, and that's because I'm not going to go tell you to do something that I didn't do myself. When I made the switch from caster to tanking and eventually played Dark Knight, I didn't spend a whole lot of time trying to understand all of the niche techniques that Dark Knight had to offer. I didn't even understand the fundamentals, and I knew if I didn't know that, I had no shot at competing for rank 1. Now, did I eventually learn all the niche techniques? Yes, but it is my understanding that all the niche techniques that I know about Dark Knight all stem from the foundation, and if I had learned those first, I wouldn't be able to execute them correctly. I know I risk the chance of sounding overly dramatic here, but one of the biggest disappointments I've experienced when playing Final Fantasy is the amount of players that put others down for even trying to branch out. That statement about people saying that Black Mage is one of the hardest jobs in the game is absolutely false. But for some reason, to this day, I still keep hearing that. And personally, I just feel disappointed, because I feel like the type of people that are saying that are misrepresenting the playstyle of the job on purpose to gain a false sense of prestige. And that is cringe. So long story short, play whatever job you want, don't let others tell you that they can't, and if you want to play multiple, play multiple. That's pretty much all I have to say about this topic in general, but if you have any specific questions, feel free to join my Discord and ask me questions directly. I have channels specifically dedicated to answering all of your questions, so please don't be afraid to ask them. Also, make sure to check out my live streams here on YouTube or live on Twitch. I'm live every single day, and I will be streaming the entirety of my prog for the new ultimate, Kefka. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, but also to help YouTube deliver this video for those looking for this information. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos just like this one. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.